Christmas Eve was supposed to feel warm, safe, full of family vibes. Instead, I was standing outside my own house, snow slowly soaking into my shoes, while the door behind me stayed shut. Then I heard laughter. My sister was laughing. Not the kind of laugh that comes from happiness. It sounded like the laugh of someone who had finally won something she had been waiting for years to take. In that moment, I understood this was not a temporary argument. This was not anger that would pass. I had been thrown out. I held a single suitcase in my hand. I had no plan. And one question kept echoing in my chest. Was I really that easy to discard? I started walking because standing still hurt too much. With every step, the cold crept deeper, and an unfamiliar emptiness spread inside me. Then, under a streetlight, I saw her, a woman, barefoot, standing on the snow. She was not shaking. She was not panicking. She looked untouched by the cold, as if she existed outside it. And then she did something that left me completely stunned. So here's the question you need to stay for. Who was she? And how did that single moment turn my life upside down in a way that made the people who abandoned me lose everything in the end? If you have ever felt unwanted, invisible, or easily replaced, you should not miss what happens next. Before that night, my life looked stable from the outside, comfortable, predictable, the kind of life people assume is safe simply because it comes with a nice house and a familiar last name. Our home was always busy, always polished. Holiday decorations appeared right on schedule. Dinner parties happened without effort. Everything looked put together, like a picture meant for other people to admire. I believed that meant security. I believed that meant belonging. I told myself I was lucky. I had my own routines, my own space, and a quiet confidence that came from thinking you have somewhere to land if everything else falls apart. Even when things felt off, I brushed it aside. Families are complicated, I told myself. Every home has tension. This one just hit it better. Money removed obvious problems, but it did not remove distance. Conversations stayed shallow. Affection came with conditions I never learned to name. I learned to smile, to be agreeable, to avoid becoming a problem. That felt normal back then. What I did not see was how fragile my position really was. I believed effort mattered. I believed loyalty counted. I believed time earned you grace. I thought being quiet meant being safe. Looking back, that belief feels almost naive. But at the time, it was how I survived. My life was built on assumptions that were never tested until they were. I thought I was part of the foundation. I did not realize I was standing on the edge. That night outside the house did not come out of nowhere. It only exposed what had always been there, waiting for the right moment to show itself. And once I saw it, I understood something unsettling. The life I thought I had was never as solid as it looked. I was present in that family, but I was rarely seen. I learned early how to stay out of the way. I listened more than I spoke. I noticed moods before words were said. If tension entered a room, I adjusted myself to absorb it. That became my role, even if no one ever named it. Attention followed a pattern. It always moved in the same direction, toward the person who needed it least, but demanded it best. I watched how praise was given quickly to her and cautiously to me. I watched how mistakes were forgiven when they were not mine. When I succeeded, it was expected. When she succeeded, it was celebrated. I told myself this was normal sibling difference. I told myself I was strong enough not to need constant reassurance. That story helped me stay quiet. It helped everyone else stay comfortable. Decisions were made without asking me. Plans changed without explanation. My feelings were acknowledged only after they became inconvenient. I learned that being low maintenance was rewarded with being overlooked. The favoritism was subtle, which made it harder to question. It showed up in small moments. Who was believed first? Who was defended without proof? Who was given the benefit of the doubt? I adjusted my expectations instead of challenging the pattern. That felt easier than admitting I was slowly being pushed to the margins of my own family. I did not fight for space because I did not know I was losing it. By the time Christmas Eve arrived, my place had already been decided. I just had not been informed yet. And when the moment came, no one looked surprised, not even me. That was the hardest truth to face. My sister did not hate me loudly. She did not need to. Her power came from precision, from knowing exactly when to speak and when to stay silent, from understanding how to shape a moment so it leaned in her favor without ever looking for. She had mastered the art of appearing reasonable while quietly removing obstacles. I was one of those obstacles. She watched everything: how long conversations lasted, who listened, who apologized first. She learned early that control did not come from confrontation. It came from influence, from planting ideas gently and letting others believe they were their own. When I disagreed, she framed it as concern. When I pushed back, she framed it as instability. When I stayed quiet, she framed it as guilt. Nothing she did was obvious. That was the point. She asked questions that sounded innocent, but landed like accusations. She shared stories that were technically true, but carefully incomplete. She positioned herself as the easier choice, the safer one, the daughter who caused less discomfort. I did not realize how often rooms tilted toward her until I started paying attention to what happened after she spoke. Decisions closed, opinions settled, doors. What unsettled me most was her patience. She did not rush outcomes, she waited. She allowed time to do the work. She understood that if she stayed consistent long enough, people would stop questioning her version of events altogether. I thought rivalry required noise. I thought threats were obvious. I was wrong. Her goal was never to win an argument. It was to remove me from the equation. By the time Christmas Eve arrived, she did not need to ask for anything. The groundwork had already been laid. All that remained was the final moment when she could step back and let others deliver the result she wanted. And when that moment came, she did not look shocked. She looked satisfied. That was when I understood something I had avoided for years. I was not being misunderstood. I was being replaced. The betrayal did not arrive with shouting. It arrived dressed as a conversation. We were standing in the living room. The same room that looked perfect from the outs. The tree was lit. Gifts were stacked neatly. Everything felt staged. Like the setting mattered more than the people inside it. My father spoke first. His voice was calm, measured, almost polite. He said there had been discussions, decisions, things I did not need to worry about anymore. The way he said it made my stomach tighten, because people only use that tone when something irreversible has already been decided. Then he said it. My name was no longer attached to anything. Not the house, not the future plans, not the family trust. I stood there trying to process words that felt unreal. Disinherited, removed, final. Each one landed slowly, like it wanted to be understood before it hurt. My mother stayed quiet. She adjusted an ornament on the tree instead of looking at me. That silence hurt more than the words. I asked one question, just one. I asked why this was happening now. The answer did not come directly. It came wrapped in explanations: independence, and how some people needed to learn lessons the hard way. I recognized the language. It was not about money. It was about control. My sister stayed close enough to hear everything. She did not interrupt. She did not argue. She simply watched, her expression carefully neutral, as if this had nothing to do with her. But I noticed how relaxed she looked, how comfortable she seemed with the outcome. That was the humiliation. Not being removed quietly, but being removed while someone else benefited from it openly. While I stood there realizing that loyalty meant nothing when convenience was on the line, I was not given time to react. I was given instructions. What I could take, how long I had, when I needed to leave. Every detail had already been planned. That was when the truth settled in. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a mistake. This was a choice, and I was the one they chose to lose. The injustice was not just being disowned. It was being expected to accept it without question, as if my place in the family had always been conditional. That was the moment something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly and for good. The instructions were simple. Too simple for what they meant. I was told to pack what I needed and leave. No timeline beyond that. No offer to help. No question about where I would go on Christmas Eve. The assumption was clear. My problem was no longer their concern. I went upstairs alone. The hallway felt longer than usual. Quieter. Like it already knew I did not belong there anymore. I opened my closet and stared at clothes that suddenly felt borrowed. I chose without thinking. A few sweaters, jeans, my laptop, basic things that fit into a single suitcase. Everything else stayed behind. When I came back downstairs, my suitcase felt heavier than it should have. Not because of what was inside, but because of what I was leaving without being allowed to. My parents stood near the door. My mother still avoided my eyes. My father held the handle like this was a routine task. The door opened. Cold rushed in immediately, sharp and unforgiving. Snow dusted the steps. The night looked endless. I paused for a moment, not because I wanted to stay, but because I needed to understand that this was real. No one stopped me. I stepped outside, pulling my coat tighter around myself. The door closed behind me with a soft sound. That felt louder than shouting ever could. Inside, warmth remained. Outside, everything changed. I stood there with my suitcase at my feet, breathing slowly, refusing to let myself break in front of that door. If this was how they wanted it to end, I would leave with what I still had, my dignity. I did not knock. I did not beg. I did not look back. I lifted the suitcase and walked down the steps, into the cold night, with nothing promised and nothing guaranteed. But even then, one thought stayed. They could take the house. They could take the comfort. They could not take the way I chose to walk away. The street felt longer than it ever had before. Each step pulled me farther away from the house, from the lights, from the version of my life I had assumed was permanent. Snow gathered along the edges of the road, untouched and quiet, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Fear arrived slowly. Not the kind that makes you panic, but the kind that settles deep and steady. The kind that asks practical questions with no easy answers. Where would I sleep? Who would answer their phone? How long could I pretend I was fine? I tightened my grip on the suitcase handle as it rattled over the pavement. The sound followed me, sharp and repetitive, announcing my presence in a neighborhood that suddenly felt hostile. Warm windows passed on either side of the street. Trees lit with decorations, blurred together as I walked. Everyone else was inside. I was not. My thoughts began to argue with each other. One voice insisted this could not be real. That any minute someone would call me back. That families do not do this on Christmas Eve. Another voice, quieter but more convincing. reminded me that they already had. I felt embarrassed for hoping. The cold found its way through my coat, pressing against my skin until my shoulders tensed without permission. My fingers numbed. My breath came out uneven, catching on memories I had avoided for years. Every small dismissal, every time I had chosen silence to keep peace, had I taught them how easy I was to remove. I stopped under a streetlight and rested the suitcase beside me. My legs ached, but it was nothing compared to the weight inside my chest. I looked back once, just to confirm the truth I already knew. The house remained distant, still, unchanged. That was when the conflict reached its breaking point. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to go back. I wanted to disappear. Instead, I stood there, breathing through the fear, realizing that this walk was doing something irreversible. It was stripping away every illusion I had protected myself with. I was no longer pretending everything was fine, and that realization hurt more than the cold ever could. The bench appeared before I realized I needed it. It sat beneath a single streetlight, half covered in snow, cold and uninviting. I lowered myself onto it anyway, setting the suitcase beside my feet, like it was the last proof that my life still existed. The moment I stopped moving, everything I had been holding back caught up to me. Tears came without warning. Not loud sobs, not anything dramatic, just steady, silent tears that blurred my vision and froze against my cheeks before I could wipe them away. My shoulders shook as I bent forward, pressing my hands together to stop them from trembling. This was it. No plan, no home, no one waiting for me to figure it out. I stared at the ground, watching my breath fog the air, and felt something close to panic settle in. Questions crowded my mind, all of them unanswered. How did a life unravel this fast? How did love disappear so cleanly? How did I end up here, on a public bench, on Christmas Eve? Memories surfaced without permission. Being told to be patient. Being told to understand. Being told I was strong enough to handle things on my own. Strength, I realized, had been used as an excuse to leave me unsupported. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to create warmth where none existed. The cold pressed in from every side, but the emptiness inside me felt worse. It felt permanent. For the first time that night, a dangerous thought crossed my mind. Maybe they were right to let me go. The thought scared me enough to look up, to search the street for anything that might ground me back in reality. The road remained empty. The houses stayed silent. No vehicle arrived. I sat there longer than I meant to, letting the weight of everything settle fully. That bench was not just a place to rest. It was the moment I reached the very bottom, with nothing left to distract me from the truth I had been avoiding. I had lost everything I thought defined me, and I had no idea what came next. Footsteps broke the silence before I saw anyone. They were slow, uneven, almost careful, as if whoever was walking did not want to disturb the night. I lifted my head, wiping my face with the sleeve of my coat, expecting to see a dog walker or a neighbor cutting through the street. Instead, I saw her. She stepped into the circle of light cast by the street lamp, and my breath caught. She was older, wrapped in a thin, worn coat that did not belong in that weather. Her silver hair moved freely in the wind, and her feet were bare, pressed directly against the snow. For a moment, I thought exhaustion was playing tricks on me. No one stands barefoot in the snow like this. Not calmly, not without flinching, yet she stood there as if the cold had made a mistake and forgotten her. She did not rush toward me. She did not ask for help. She simply looked around, then met my eyes, steady and unreadable. Her face showed no panic, no desperation, only a quiet awareness that made the moment feel deliberate, almost staged. I straightened instinctively, my heart beating faster. Every instinct told me to be cautious. It was late. The street was empty. Nothing about this made sense, and yet I could not look away. The image did not fit the night, or the neighborhood, or any logical explanation I could reach for. She took another step forward. Snow clung to her skin. Still, she did not react. I noticed then how still everything else felt. No cars passed. No doors opened. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the world had narrowed to this one strange intersection between two lives. She stopped a few feet away from me, close enough for me to see the lines on her face, the calm in her eyes. Those eyes held something unsettling. Recognition. Not of my face, but of my state, as if she understood exactly why I was sitting there, shaking, with a suitcase at my feet and tears still drying on my skin. I had no explanation for her presence. I had no reason to trust it, but I knew, with a certainty that surprised me, that this was not a coincidence. The night had not finished with me yet. She spoke first, her voice quiet but steady, as if the cold had no authority over it. She asked if I knew where she could find shelter for the night. Nothing dramatic, no plea, just a simple question, carried by breath that formed faint clouds in the air. I looked down again at her feet, red and stiff against the snow, and something inside me shifted. I wanted to say I did not know. I wanted to protect what little I had left. But the truth was impossible to ignore. She did not. The coat was not expensive, but it was warm. It was the only barrier between me and the cold that had been slowly working its way into my bones. I hesitated, feeling the weight of that reality settle over me. Giving it away would leave me exposed. Keeping it would leave her in danger. The choice felt unfair. It also felt clear. I stood up before I could talk myself out of it. My fingers moved slowly, unbuttoning the coat as the cold rushed in immediately, sharp and punishing. I stepped closer and wrapped it around her shoulders, pulling it tight, the way someone once did for me when I was small. Her reaction stopped me. She did not protest. She did not rush. She closed her eyes. Relief crossed her face in a way that felt intimate, almost sacred. Her hands trembled as she held the coat closed, and when she looked at me again, tears lined her lashes. Not from fear, from recognition. She took my hands in hers. They were colder than mine. She thanked me, slowly, carefully, like the words mattered. Then she said something that stayed with me long after the night ended. She said kindness like that does not come from comfort. It comes from knowing what it feels like to have nothing. I stood there shaking, not just from the cold, but from the strange warmth spreading through my chest. I had given away the last thing protecting me, and yet I felt lighter than I had all night. I did not know why that mattered. I did not know what it would lead to. I only knew that this choice, made on instinct and compassion, had just altered the direction of my life in a way I could not yet see. The night was no longer empty. The moment passed faster than I expected. 1 second, she was standing in front of me, wrapped in my coat, her hands still warm from the contact. The next, she stepped back, creating distance without explanation. There was no urgency in her movement, no hesitation either. It was as if she had already decided what came next. She thanked me again, quietly. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her go, confused and unsettled, waiting for her to look back. She did not. Her figure moved steadily down the street, bare feet pressing into the snow without slowing her pace. Each step felt deliberate, purposeful, like she knew exactly where she was headed. I stayed seated on the bench, frozen in place, my arms wrapped around myself. The cold bit harder now, sharp enough to steal my breath. Still, I did not move. I told myself she would stop, that she would turn around, that this strange moment would explain itself. It did not. She reached the edge of the streetlight's glow and disappeared into the darkness. swallowed by fog and falling snow. Just like that, she was gone. No sound, no trace, no clear reason for why she had appeared in the first place. I sat there, staring at the empty street, replaying everything that had just happened. The choice I had made, the words she had spoken, the look in her eyes when she took my coat. Questions crowded my mind. Who walks barefoot in the snow without fear? Why did she seem more composed than I was? And why did her presence feel intentional rather than random? The night felt different after she left, not quieter, heavier, as if something had been set in motion and could not be undone. I hugged my arms tighter, teeth chattering, unsure whether I had just made a terrible mistake or the only right decision of the night. All I knew was this: she did not take only my coat with her. She took certainty, she took answers, and she left me with a mystery that refused to let go. The truth did not come gently. It arrived with precision. An hour after she vanished, the street changed. Headlights cut through the fog, one after another, until the quiet road was lined with black cars that did not belong there. Engines idled in perfect unison. Doors stayed closed. Nothing about it felt accidental. I stood up slowly, my body still cold, my mind struggling to catch up. One of the cars opened. A woman stepped out, and for a second, my breath stopped completely. It was her, the same face, the same eyes, but everything else was different. She wore a long, tailored coat that looked impossibly warm. Her hair was neatly styled. Diamond studs caught the light as she moved. She was no longer barefoot. People emerged around her, discreet and efficient, creating a quiet perimeter without drawing attention. No one rushed, no one stared. It was controlled, in a way that signaled power, without announcing it. She walked toward me, like this moment had always been scheduled. "I was hoping you would still be here," she said, her voice calm, familiar. "Most people are not." I could not speak. Every question collided at once, leaving me frozen in place. She explained without dramatics. She told me her name. She told me what she owned. She told me what she oversaw. The numbers felt unreal, but the certainty in her voice was not. This was not wealth that needed to prove itself. This was influence that moved quietly and expected obedience. Then she told me why she had been there barefoot. It was not an accident. It was not desperation. It was a test. Once a year, she walked without protection, without status, without safety, to see who would notice when kindness cost something. Most people looked away. Some offered sympathy from a distance. Very few gave up comfort when it meant personal risk. She watched me give away the only thing keeping me warm. "That told me more about you than any background check ever could," she said. The cold, the bench, the night suddenly made sense. She had not appeared by chance. She had appeared by design. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "I have been looking for someone like you for a long time," she said. "And now I know you are real." The mystery did not disappear. It deepened because whatever she had just seen in me, it was powerful enough to rewrite the future I thought had ended on that bench. She did not offer me money. That was the first thing that caught me off guard. I had expected sympathy, or at least a gesture meant to soften the night I had just survived. Instead, she spoke with intention, the kind that makes you straighten without realizing it. She told me she did not believe in rescuing people. She believed in testing them, then trusting them with responsibility. That word landed heavily: responsibility. She explained that what she offered was not a favor and not a shortcut. It would require discipline, learning, and an uncomfortable amount of honesty. I would be expected to show up early, listen more than I spoke, and accept correction without resentment. Comfort would not be guaranteed. Failure would be possible. I felt my chest tighten as she spoke. This was not an escape. This was a challenge. She said she had resources, access, and reach, but none of it mattered without the right person to carry it forward. She needed someone who understood what it felt like to lose everything and still choose decency when no one was watching. Then she looked at me and asked a question I was not prepared for. Are you willing to be accountable for something bigger than yourself? It was not phrased as a test, but it felt like one. I thought about the house behind me, the door that had closed without hesitation, the bench where I had cried until my chest hurt. I thought about how easy it would be to say yes, simply to feel safe again. That was what scared me, because accepting meant stepping into a life where excuses would not work, where effort would be visible, where my choices would matter beyond survival. She gave me time. No pressure, no persuasion, just silence, allowing the weight of the offer to settle fully. I realized then why my hands were shaking. I was not afraid of failing. I was afraid of succeeding in a world that would never let me hide again. When I finally looked up, she was still watching, patient and composed, waiting to see whether I would choose comfort or courage. And for the first time that night, the choice felt entirely mine. The year that followed did not feel like rescue. It felt like pressure. My days began before sunrise and ended long after dark. Schedules replaced uncertainty, but they did not bring comfort. I learned quickly that access came with expectations, and expectations did not bend for sympathy. I was required to earn my place every single day. Training came first. I was taught how to observe before reacting, how to listen without preparing a response, how to read rooms where power spoke quietly and decisions were made without announcement. Mistakes were corrected immediately. Excuses were ignored. Progress was measured in consistency, not enthusiasm. The work was relentless. I studied systems I had never seen up close: contracts, foundations, long-term planning that affected people I would never meet. Numbers carried weight. Decisions carried consequences. I learned that good intentions meant nothing without discipline to support them. Pressure followed me everywhere. There were meetings where I felt invisible again, seated at the edge of rooms filled with confidence I had not yet earned. There were nights I returned to a quiet space and questioned whether I belonged there at all. Doubt surfaced often, especially when expectations rose faster than my confidence. No one softened the pace for me. That was intentional. She watched without interference, stepping in only when failure threatened to teach the wrong lesson. When she corrected me, it was direct and unsparing. When I succeeded, acknowledgement was brief and private. Praise was rare. Growth was N. I learned how to carry responsibility without asking for permission. I learned how to make decisions that would be questioned and stand by them anyway. I learned that leadership was not volume or dominance, but clarity under pressure. The hardest moments came when I wanted to quit, not because I was incapable, but because comfort called louder than ambition. There were days I missed anonymity, days I missed being overlooked. Being trusted felt heavier than being ignored ever had. But I stayed. I stayed because every challenge stripped away something I no longer needed: the need to please, the habit of shrinking, the belief that safety came from silence. By the end of that year, exhaustion had reshaped me, not into someone harder, but into someone steadier, someone who could stand in uncertainty without apologizing for taking space. That year did not rebuild what I lost. It replaced it with something stronger. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, I understood that pressure was not punishment, it was preparation. Change did not arrive with confidence. It arrived quietly, through repetition. One day, I noticed I no longer waited for permission before speaking. Another day, I realized I did not rehearse explanations in my head before making decisions. The hesitation that once followed me into every room began to loosen its grip. I stood differently, not taller, not louder, just steadier. I started trusting my own judgment, even when it made others uncomfortable. Disagreement no longer felt like danger. Silence no longer felt like safety. I learned that clarity carried more weight than approval ever had. The work reshaped how I saw myself. I stopped measuring my value by how easily I fit into someone else's expectations. I stopped apologizing for taking time, space, or responsibility. I learned that confidence was not something you announced. It was something people noticed when you stopped explaining yours. Mistakes still happened, they just stopped defining me. I accepted correction without collapse. I accepted success without suspicion. When challenges appeared, I did not assume they meant I was failing. I assumed they meant I was trusted with more. That shift changed everything. The person who once walked quietly through rooms now walked with intention. The person who once feared being replaced now understood that she was not interchangeable. I no longer needed constant reassurance because I had learned how to stand on my own judgment. The most surprising change was internal. I felt calm. Not because life became easier, but because I stopped negotiating my worth. I knew who I was becoming, and I did not need consensus to confirm it. By the time I looked back at the woman who stood outside her parents' house with a suitcase, she felt familiar but distant. Not erased, not rejected, integrated. I had not become someone unrecognizable. I had become someone undeniable. And that made all the difference moving forward. The shift happened without ceremony. There was no announcement, no applause, no moment where everyone stopped to acknowledge it. One morning, decisions that used to be explained to me were simply placed in front of me. Files arrived on my desk with a quiet expectation attached to them. Handle this. At first, I assumed it was temporary, a test, something that would be reviewed later. But the pattern continued. Meetings adjusted around my availability. Questions came to me before they went anywhere else. When disagreements surfaced, eyes turned in my direction, waiting. I realized what was happening when someone said, "We will go with her judgment," and no one challenged it. Power had shifted. Not because I demanded it, not because I asked for more, because I had become reliable under pressure. The promotion was never offered formally. It was absorbed, integrated. I was entrusted with outcomes that carried weight beyond my own role. Choices I made affected timelines, people, and futures that extended far past my immediate reach. That responsibility felt different than ambition. Ambition had once been about proving myself. This was about not failing others. I noticed how people spoke to me now. Slower, more carefully, not out of fear, but recognition. Authority, I learned, does not need volume. It settles into a room. When consistency meets clarity. The most surprising part was how little it changed me internally. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt prepared to stand behind decisions without flinching, prepared to accept consequences without deflection, prepared to lead without needing to be liked. That was the real promotion, not the title I never asked for, but the position I no longer had to fight to earn. I had crossed an invisible line. One I did not even know existed when I was standing outside in the cold. Power had found me, where I was already standing, and for the first time, I did not question whether I deserved it. They returned quietly. No dramatic entrance, no confidence, just a message that appeared on my phone one evening, careful and restrained, written in a tone I barely recognized. It asked if we could talk. Not demanded, not assumed. Asked. That alone told me everything had changed. When I agreed to meet, they arrived early. My parents sat side by side, closer than usual, as if proximity could substitute for unity. My sister followed a few steps behind them. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. The sharp ease she once carried was gone. They did not look at the room. They looked at me. My father spoke first, his voice softer than I remembered. He said things had been difficult, that circumstances had shifted, that decisions had not worked out the way anyone expected. Each sentence avoided responsibility, while circling the same conclusion. They needed help. My mother nodded along, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She spoke about family, about history, about how time had passed and feelings had cooled. Her words searched my face for permission to continue. My sister waited. When she finally spoke, it was carefully measured. She said there had been misunderstandings, pressure, stress. She did not apologize directly. She implied regret without naming it, as if clarity would weaken her position. The dynamic was unmistakable. They were no longer choosing. They were negotiating. I listened without interrupting. I noticed how often they checked my reaction, how quickly their confidence adjusted to my silence. The power they once exercised without thought now required approval. They spoke about losses, about instability, about how quickly security disappears when it is taken for granted. I recognized the language immediately. It was the same language once used to justify my removal, only now it was aimed inward. They asked if we could find a way forward, if there was space to rebuild, if I would consider helping them get back on their feet. No one mentioned Christmas Eve directly. No one mentioned the door. No one mentioned the laughter. They did not need to. Desperation filled the gaps. I looked at them, really looked at them, and felt something unexpected. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. I understood then that they were not here because they missed me. They were here because they had run out of options. And for the first time in my life, I was the one deciding what happened next. I did not answer right away. Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, just honest. I let it stay there long enough for them to understand that this conversation would not be rushed or rescued. The version of me who used to fill gaps for others no longer existed. I spoke slowly, choosing clarity over comfort. I said I was sorry they were struggling. That part was true. I did not celebrate their fear or their uncertainty, but I also said I would not fix what I did not break. I would not step back into a role that required me to shrink so others could feel stable. My mother looked down. My father nodded once, as if he expected this. My sister shifted in her seat, the old impatience flashing briefly across her face before she controlled it again. I explained my boundaries without accusation. I said help without accountability only repeats patterns. I said rebuilding trust requires honesty, not urgency. I said family cannot be something you remember, only when you need shelter. Each sentence felt grounded, not rehearsed, like it came from a place I had finally earned access to. They listened, not because they agreed, because they had no leverage left. My sister tried one last angle. She spoke about moving forward, about letting go of the P, about how holding firm could feel like punishment. I met her eyes and told her calmly that boundaries are not punishment. They are protection. That ended it. I did not raise my voice. I did not justify myself. I did not offer alternatives disguised as compromises. I stood up when the conversation reached its natural end. No dramatics, no lingering. I wished them well and meant it, in the way that allows distance to remain intact. As I walked away, I felt something unfamiliar, but steady. Peace, not relief from winning, not satisfaction from refusing. Peace from knowing I did not abandon myself to save others from consequences they had chosen. I did not owe them access to the life I rebuilt without them. That was the dignity they could not take from me. For years, my calm had been mistaken for weakness. That day, it became something else entirely. It became final. I did nothing after that meeting. No posts, no statements, no explanations. And that was when everything unraveled on its own. The first signs appeared quietly. A missed payment here, a delayed obligation there. The kind of problems that stay hidden until they can no longer be managed privately. Then the questions started, from people who had once assumed stability was permanent, from circles that no longer received quick answers. My sister tried to control the narrative. She shared fragments online, carefully framed moments meant to suggest reconciliation without accountability. Sympathy appeared briefly, then curiosity. Curiosity turned into scrutiny. Old clips resurfaced. Old comments were revisited. Timelines did not align the way she expected them to. People noticed. The image she had curated for years began to crack under the weight of consistency. Screenshots circulated. Stories conflicted. The confidence she once relied on no longer carried authority without proof. My parents fared no better. Business relationships cooled. Invitations stopped arriving. People who once overlooked patterns began asking questions they should have asked long ago. Silence replaced access. Doors closed politely but firmly. No one announced consequences, they simply arrived. I watched from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a strange sense of inevitability. This was not punishment. This was exposure to reality, without insulation. The same reality I had been introduced to on Christmas Eve. When my sister reached out again, her message was shorter, less composed. She asked why this was happening. I did not respond. I did not need to. The truth does not require a spokesperson. What struck me most was how quickly public perception adjusted once clarity appeared. People do not enjoy being misled. They withdraw trust faster than they give it. Reputation, I learned, is not destroyed by one event. It collapses when patterns become visible. Karma did not rush. It waited until the timing was right. I did not gain anything from their loss. My life did not improve because theirs became harder. What changed was internal. I stopped carrying responsibility for outcomes that were never mine to manage. Watching consequences unfold without my involvement confirmed something important. Walking away had not weakened me. Staying silent had not made me small. It had allowed truth to surface without distortion. And that truth did exactly what it was meant to do. Without my permission or participation, it finished what I had already let go. The last door did not look dramatic. It did not glow. It did not make noise when it opened. It was ordinary, quiet, and entirely mine. By the time everything settled, I realized something important. Freedom did not arrive the day I was thrown out. It arrived much later, when I stopped measuring myself through people who never planned to keep me. When I stopped waiting for understanding from those who benefited from my silence. I learned that self-worth is not proven by endurance. It is proven by choice. The choice to walk away without hatred. The choice to refuse access without guilt. The choice to build a life that does not require constant justification. I did not win because they lost. I won because I stopped playing a game that was rigged from the start. The night I was forced out felt like rejection. Looking back now, it feels like release. Being removed from a space that could never hold me was the first honest thing that family ever did for me. Everything after that was mine to shape. I no longer wonder if I was too much. I no longer ask if I should have stayed quieter. I know this now. Places that require you to shrink are not homes. People who laugh when you fall are not safe. And doors that close on you without explanation were never meant to be opened again. The barefoot woman did not save me. She revealed me. She reminded me that kindness given freely is strength, not weakness. That dignity survives loss. That character shows up when comfort disappears. I'll walk through my final door without looking back, not because I was bitter, but because I was done explaining myself to the past. And if you are listening to this story, and something in it feels uncomfortably familiar, let me ask you one thing. How many times have you stayed where you were not valued, simply because leaving felt scary? If this story spoke to you, stay with this channel. More stories like this are coming. Stories about boundaries, growth, and quiet power. Like the video if you believe self-worth should never be negotiable. Subscribe if you are choosing yourself this season. Because sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is walk through the door that finally sets her free.